Hi, good morning, everybody. I hope everybody can hear me anyway. So welcome to this virtual roundtable where we're going to explore the subject of how the changing green energy landscape is going to affect smart energy strategies. So this event's been hosted by Inspired Business Media, as you know, and we're quite fortunate today to have Labona Vernon with us, who is from ESB, who is our sponsor. So we'll hear more from him later on. So just to give you a bit of background about what we're going to try and do, I think as you're all probably aware, there's a lot of companies out there who are looking at things like a net zero carbon ambition, looking at science-based targets, looking at GHG emissions reduction. And I think it's causing them to ask about how they can accelerate their energy management plans. So this morning we're going to explore a little bit about how companies are developing, how companies are implementing those plans. And we're going to discuss a little bit about how obstacles are getting in the way, so particularly things like COVID, for example, and explore a little bit about that. So hopefully that should work really well. We want to keep this pretty interactive, so during the call, we'll probably put a poll up there and ask you some questions about what you understand by this topic, and we're going to leave enough time for question and answers at the end. But if you do have questions during the way, use the chat function to be able to go and ask those questions. And Andrew, who was our host today, he'll be coordinating those in the background. So hopefully that all makes sense. So let's do a bit of introduction. So my name's Martin Seal. I have just retired from working for PepsiCo. So I worked for PepsiCo for 22 years. I was their environmental sustainability director based in Europe. So I was part of a team who pulled together the performance with purpose strategy for PepsiCo, and then I led a European team in delivering against those targets. So I've been part of quite a whole host of different collaborative forums in my time, and I've quite enjoyed interacting with different people. So I thought today was a great opportunity for me to host a roundtable and to try and moderate between four guys who are really experienced in this area, and try and use my expertise to bring the very best out for the topic in hand. So hopefully that all makes sense for everybody. So let's start off by introducing the panel we've got this morning. So let's start off, I'll introduce you to Tim. Tim, tell us a bit about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. My name is Tim Rose. I am the Global Facilities Director for Electa for Electa UK. Electa are a medical manufacturing company that manufacture primarily cancer treatment equipment, specifically for radiation. We are a global company, Swedish company, but we have sites across 35 countries, manufacturing sites here in the UK in Crawley, also in Beijing, in Montreal, and also in Veenendaal in Holland. I've been managing facilities now for a whole of my career, 30 years. Previously, a long time in the avionics industry with Rockwell Collins, and prior to that, in the public sector, I was head of facilities for Sussex Police. So I've seen everything over the years, and it's just a joy that the energy is so much higher up on the agenda at the current time. I have had a huge interest in it over the last 2 or 3 years as it's developed. So delighted to be here this afternoon or this morning.
Excellent. Labona, I can see you, so introduce yourself.
Hi there, my name is Labona Vernon. I am a client solutions manager with ESB Energy, who are the Irish state-owned energy utility, working, operating everything from upstream energy generation assets through to providing energy retail to businesses and to residential customers across Ireland. In the UK here, we focus primarily on smart energy solutions, so we don't really have a B2B energy offering, and are focused more on domestic energy and smart energy services. So working primarily with large energy demand users, to basically help them, further improve how they use energy and to drive efficiencies where indeed possible. Across the UK, we work with 10 large energy demand customers, with a few more projects that have currently stalled due to COVID, but focusing primarily on behind the meter cogeneration energy efficiency measures as well.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that. We've got another couple of panelists. We're struggling to get them in at the moment in time. But let's continue on with the subject area, you know. And I think what I'll probably try and do is I'll try and fill in a little bit from my experience, the background. So clearly, in terms of smart energy strategy, that was one of the key planks of the PepsiCo program. So as much as I can, I'll sort of chip in a little bit and see how we can make that work. So we are recording the session, so afterwards you can come back to it and you can reference that way around. So let's go off by temperature checking what people already know about this subject area. So I want to pose a little bit of questions on the poll. So you'll see a poll has just come out in front of you. What we're interested to tell us all about is what do you understand by the term smart energy strategy and what that might include? Do you fully understand it? So tick yes for if you 100% understand it, no if you're not really sure at all, or if you're somewhere between the two, let us know. And then you'll see the second question, do you have a smart energy strategy or carbon emissions reduction target in place for your organisation? So I think what we want to try and do is get a bit of a flavour for, do people understand this subject already? Do they have targets in place at their organisation? So feel free to start voting now, and hopefully we'll be able to see the results come through on the poll. Well, we haven't got many people who voted, but in general, a general view out there is that there's not a massive amount of awareness of what a smart energy strategy might look like. And it looks like people who are on the call who have got a target in place, it looks like that's probably a carbon target primarily. But again, some people have neither of these. So I think what we're going to try and do during the call this morning, during the round table, is talk a little bit more about these two topics in particular, and hopefully that's going to expand everybody's knowledge in terms of what's happening in this area. So let's go and break out. Let's hear a little bit more from the panelists. So I thought it would be good to talk a little bit at the start to get your own opinion of, you know, what do you guys understand by the term smart energy strategy, and talk a little bit about how is that incorporated into your business goals. So it gives a bit of flavour for that. So Tim, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm delighted to. I mean, for me, smart energy strategy is the next step on for us as an organisation from the Energy Savings Opportunities Scheme, ESOS. It's our longer term energy reduction planning over 1 to 5 years, but it's not just about carbon footprint. It's about our energy supply, looking at our renewables, whether we have a renewable source. It is about reduction, but it's looking at our manufacturing methods. We're looking at our plant replacement through our CapEx replacement program, and whether we can look at improving any systems to reduce energy. It's looking at our waste, it's looking at our distribution, and it's also looking at our supply chain and building some of those energy reduction targets into our supply chain, and looking to see whether ethically they're the right people we should be working with. And it's a huge step. We're very, very early into it. We're into, a year into our key strategy plan, moving on from ESOS. And it's a challenge, certainly this year. But just to give you one quick example, we've got to keep in our manufacturing process, we have a requirement to chill water quite quickly. And that plant is 16 years old, it's due for replacement. Rather than doing a like-for-like replacement, it's looking at the process and the engineering of that process, and can we put in an improved a process that removes that cooling requirement, or can provide us with a piece of plant that will reduce the energy efficiency or improve the energy efficiency of that plant. So it's a lot of key things other than reducing our carbon footprint.
Yeah, so it sounds like a real integrated approach, Chris, that you've got across the whole supply chain, and you're really using it to rethink your own organisation, your own way of operation. It's a very interesting way of looking at it, I think. So, Labona, obviously you're more of a service provider. Talk a little bit about how that works for your organisation. What would you see by the word smart energy strategy, and how does your business approach that?
It's actually, quite an interesting question coming from a utility like ESB, because we do have, large upstream generation assets. But as I said, here in the UK, our focus is on behind the meter, so we don't really have much generation here in the UK. Having said that, we do have a couple of, very, how you say, efficient gas peaker plants. There's an 884 megawatt turbine in Carrington, right? So what I'd say was my view of a smart energy strategy is a cost-effective, sustainable approach to energy management, whereby on-site energy production, if possible, infrastructure requirements, and energy consumption are all integrated. So you're looking at the view holistically, which leads to energy as a service and minimum waste. Now, as I said, so for the smart energy services side of the business, that means helping large users drive efficiencies across their supply chain, their processes, and whatnot. But then from a large utility perspective, where we are actually generating the power and providing that to users in the Republic of Ireland, then it's also a case of ensuring that we are divesting, moving away from old thermal plant to renewable sources. We currently have about 812 megawatts of wind generation. It means helping the consumer or the end user transition, whether it means through the electrification of transport. So we have the entire EV network that we built out across Ireland as well. And here in the UK, we're currently building out a network in Birmingham, London, and Coventry. So it means it's about taking, as Tim pointed out, doing a lot of small, separate little steps, right? Building on from the ESOL service, but also, driving this transition, this decarbonization effort, both from a generation perspective, but then also from a retail.
So you're sort of saying the decarbonization thing. From what you're saying is you're there providing solutions to clients who want to physically go and do that, and your business is openly looking at what it needs to do to create the infrastructure then to provide those solutions. It sounds very real. I quite like when you talked about the cost and sustainability of a strategy as well. I think that's an area a lot of people I think miss. That this should be about being cost effective, being smart, being resilient in the future. So it's very interesting. So
absolutely.
So at the moment we're having some real technical difficulties with getting the other panelists in. So what's just is let's keep going, and if we can sort of dial them in as we go along, we will actively do that. But we're probably going to rely quite heavily on Tim and Labona at this moment in time. But let's see how we do. I think it could still work out really well for us. So let's just move on. I think we talked a little bit about how obstacles are getting in the way. I think because of the COVID pandemic that's currently happening, I think it'd be quite interesting for people to understand how is the COVID-19 pandemic affecting the delivery of the work that you're doing in the sustainability in the energy field. Are you seeing you're stalling? Are you managing to maintain progress, or are you actually even seeing an acceleration in the way you look at that? So it'd be good to sort of hear perspective. So do you want to go again, Tim? You want to talk about that
absolutely. I mean, for us, really, COVID-19 hasn't changed our delivery. What we've seen is a huge, as everyone has, huge reduction in people in the workplace, in the office workplace. Our manufacturing as a medical supplier hasn't stopped. In fact, it's increased, if anything. So we're hugely protective of that manufacturing hub and team on site. But it hasn't stopped us. I mean, we've got 2 or 3 particular CapEx replacements where we've pushed it into the next financial year because we're concentrating on critical spend this year. But it's, we've been very, very strong in our communication saying that this isn't a cancellation. It's just a delay till next year. And the other thing is, as you'd expect when you've got an office that's, 5% full, we've got a huge reduction in energy. So it's very, very difficult to accurately record our energy savings in the normal way against our targets that we set for this year. So I think that's a quick message for everyone. Don't fall into the trap of setting reduction targets on this very freak year of massive reduction in the workspace. Look at the previous year and look at next year and don't set targets that you're going to shoot yourself into the foot with. So that's the key problem is accurately working out where we've saved, because we've got a bit of a false saving in place from lack of people in the building.
And are you still seeing your programme maintaining itself in terms of investment in the solutions you want to take? Is that your business able to keep supporting that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a hugely successful company. Of course, like everyone, our cash flow is a key issue this year, because whilst we've got an order book for our equipment and machinery, we've got hospitals globally that are concentrating on managing COVID-19 and quite understandably delayed installation of radiation equipment. And secondly, you know, that we're moving equipment and our supply chain is coming in from multiple countries around the globe, and sometimes it's extremely difficult to get our engineering install teams, you know, for Latvia or wherever they're going into. Russia, a big install going on at the moment, and it's very difficult because each country border they're going across, they're having to self-isolate for 14 days, or having to manage with the local restrictions. So that's a big challenge for us. But so delaying. But our program is absolutely black and white. It links into our main board and our you know, our strategy board for our program, so it's not impacted in any way. It's just slightly delayed.
So it's a bit of a stalling impact then.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think we might. Chris, are you on audio now?
Hi, I am, yeah, and apologies all for late joining. We've had some technical difficulties, so apologies for that. Yeah, my name's Chris White, and I'm from Marston's PLC, pub and brewery operator. So yeah, just to answer this question, we've had big challenges, obviously with COVID, with much of the hospitality industry shutting. We've had quite big proportions of the year where we've been closed across our hotel and pub operations, albeit our brewing operations have stayed open. So that's brought big challenges for the business, and obviously we've had to kind of change our direction, change our targets in line with those changes. And we've also seen reductions in obviously amounts of resources, either people on furlough, and we've also had a restructure of the business. And we've had reduced in capital spend directly on energy and our carbon projects. So there's been some quite significant impact. Having said that, we've just entered a new financial year, and the business has committed to a reduced, but it has committed to a capital spend for this year, which is great to see. And there's other areas of the business that have been given no capital this year. So I think that does show that there is still, you know, great support in what we're doing and pushing our carbon strategy and energy strategy forward.
Yeah, great. It sounds like a real tricky time for you at the moment. You were telling me about, you know, having to virtually close down 1,400 pubs and restaurants sort of overnight as part of the lockdown too, and how that was impacted. So thanks for joining us on the call. Appreciate it. So Mark, are you there? We've got Mark Durrington with us, who's from Biofarm. So would you like to sort of just go into this question? Let's talk a bit more about how COVID-19 is impacting delivery on your sustainability or energy agenda. Mark, give us your perspective on that.
Sure. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can, yeah.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, so it's Mark Durrington. I'm the EHS Security and FM Director at Ipsen Biofarm, part of the Ipsen Pharmaceutical Group. So in terms of COVID-19, we have noticed obviously a reduction in staff on site, but our manufacturing, not only on this site, but across the organisation, has continued to operate. We've only had kind of 1 week of downtime during the COVID pandemic. So it's really not affected the business in any way, shape or form in terms of projects, sustainability projects for the sites. We've managed to maintain pretty much the targeted projects for the year. They've slightly been delayed, obviously, due to contractors not being able to access the sites, but as a whole, we'll end the year with 100% target hits, which is fantastic. The majority of our energy that we use on site is actually used on our HVACs. So 75% of the company's energy is used on HVAC systems for the pharmaceutical industry. So that means that obviously, even with people not being on site, overall there's not a significant reduction in usage of energy due to that factor. But the projects we've done, we've managed to keep on track and complete successfully this year.
Yeah, so quite an interesting balance across the panel there. You know, Chris talking about the fact that they virtually had to close all their outlets. You know, Tim and Mark managing to sort of keep their businesses keeping going during the crisis, even though it sounds like everybody's been impacted by staff not being there. So that fluctuation in demand seems to be sort of hitting everybody. I quite like Chris. I think Chris sort of talked to him. Tim talked about, you know, this isn't a normal year. Try and look at the trend outside of the normal year. I thought that was a very interesting way of looking at it. Let's have a move on and take us on. You know, we've obviously talked about smart energy strategy. It'd be good to hear from the panelists about who sort of owns that smart energy strategy within the organisation. You know, and tell us a little bit more about how do you go about building awareness of that strategy down at the shop floor level amongst the different functions that you've got within your business. So, Tim, do you want to talk a bit more about that and what
yeah, absolutely. I mean, for us, ownership's at board level. So but it's you know, it's taken some time to get there, and this is new for this year. But we've incorporated it, the responsibility into the board and the sustainability report that we produce annually. So I sit on a sustainability board, and I report each month on target progress. And it's not just about energy use. You know, we're reporting on our packaging, we're reporting on our reduction, our carbon footprint, our waste management, zero landfill. So it's a whole clutch of things into our sustainability report. You raised a good question there on how do we get this down, you know, to our teams, onto our manufacturing floor and things like that. I think it's just drip feed, building it into our toolbox talks, having smart systems. Our manufacturing director has implemented all sorts of smart working initiatives into the factory. So the team, right from the bottom, or not from the bottom, but right from manufacturing right through to our office teams, have got the message on how important sustainability is. It is not a quick process. It has taken us 3 years of planning and strategy building, and working out what fits and what works and what doesn't work to get to the stage we are. And it's an ongoing process. It takes, you know, we're just at the start of our journey, and it will change, particularly as the norm. You know, we're in a new norm now of where people work, and a lot of people working from home moving forward. So it's been a challenge. We're at the start of it. It's working, but we can do better.
Yeah. It sounds like it's very interesting now. You know, you've got a broader carbon target. It includes lots of different things. This is one subset of it, but I'm quite impressed how you talked about, you know, great ownership for the sounds of it through your organisation, through your manufacturing director, and that drip by drip. You know, it's definitely sort of, as I know, a long process. So
yeah, and travel as well, Martin. You know, at this time of year, I would have probably taken 30 or 40 flights this year, visiting our sites. I haven't taken one. Has it impacted my job ability and what I've been able to achieve? Absolutely not. So there's a new norm moving forward. You know, we don't need to fly and travel around. I was disappointed about shopping in Montreal, but you know, that's
yeah, I can't say that will be top of my list, shopping in Montreal. So what about the other guys? Just talk to us a little bit. I think Mark, talk to us a little bit about how your business has sort of approached this and how you're building that into the culture. I think you mentioned to me that you've done some work with the SDGs within your organisation as well. So
yeah, so very similar in one sense. It's owned by the board. So the strategy is based upon the UN sustainability goals, so the 17 goals. And for this particular topic, obviously goal 13, which is climate action, is one of the ones that we focus upon. It's driven from the kind of top down, but what we've tried to aim to do is not only send out communications across the business, but get stakeholders within the business involved. So it's not just coming from the corporate sustainability group, it's also coming from the EHS, facilities estate group, engineering groups, and even human resources. So everybody's involved across the board on all the UN sustainability goals, and we've aligned our strategy towards that. And I think because of that factor, it means we get the buy-in from the sites, we get the buy-in from the staff. They know exactly what we're trying to aim to achieve. And it's been sold to the businesses as if we perform well from a sustainability perspective, good sustainability in business equals investment, shareholder and stakeholder engagement. So it's a real sales pitch externally, but also it's a good way of selling it internally as well. And a lot of recently we've done a huge amount on energy campaigns, trying to drive through the business, trying to get the staff involved. And that's not just from a site perspective, but also we're looking to talk to them about things like what they do at home and so on. So it actually becomes part of their life and becomes normal. And then we start to get that buy-in and change in terms of mindset. So it's been fairly successful, but as stated already, it's a long process, and it's a huge amount of investment and time and resource to keep it going. But we've got that overall commitment from a business perspective. Yeah,
it's great to hear you talking about how the business stands to be using it as like a promotion, you know, making sure that it's just, you know, that the responsible organisation and how they're seeing that as a value going forward. I think that's what a lot of organisations are seeing. You just cannot afford not to be working this way in this space. You know, I think that's a really interesting way, and the way you've used the SDGs then to actually then build your strategy, I think that's quite an interesting way of actually doing it. So Chris, we know you guys have got sort of all these 1,400 locations outside. How do you guys go ahead with trying to sort of distill that strategy through that quite dispersed organisation? Tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah, I mean, just to echo what the guy said, we're very much the same. We're aligned to a board level with our strategy, and we're only looking to push that forward over the next year. Having said that, you know, with COVID, there has been some delays on the progression we wanted to make this year. But yeah, how do we distill that down to the site level? So we try and make sure that our targets from a corporate level are distilled down to site level targets, and then we report those down to a site level. So our sites get energy reporting with obviously AMR data that we use for gas and electric. Unfortunately, water lags a little bit behind in where we are in terms of metering. But we give them quarterly reports because we only read the meters quarterly for those. And those targets are also rolled into area managers, regional managers, operational targets as well. So it follows the whole structure of the business down.
Oh yeah, so it sounds like you've got specific targets you've got at a local level, and they roll up to this the total company level and stuff like that. It's quite an interesting way of doing it, I think. Yeah, and I think all you guys are mentioning about having like board level support, I think that's quite interesting. That seems to be a consistent theme running through, that it's important for the board to own this. And I think you all talked as well about getting your different functions involved and engage with it, even if they're not directly involved in, say, energy management, waste or water. I think it's quite an interesting way you've all approached it in a similar sort of way, although you're executing it slightly differently. So yeah, very, very interesting. So let's just move a little bit now. We sort of talked a little bit now. We sort of said we now understand a bit more about what a smart energy strategy is. We've heard a bit more from you guys about how you're organising it, how you're rolling it out. Let's have a think through, what are the sort of main technologies, the main solutions, the main partnerships that are needed to deliver your plans. Let's flip it the other way a little bit. Let's talk to Labona first. Labona, talk to us a bit about the types of partnerships, types of work that you guys are doing to help people support the goals. So.
Yeah, I mean, one thing we're doing is we're finding that you do have to get the buy-in at a very high senior level, typically board level as well, because, there is often costs, but then you're also talking about changes to, processes on site, and, that needs to be approved and needs to be vetted properly by the clients. What we have seen is it is an interest, is the need to partner with consultants who are already, who already have the trust of the customer and already understand what their buying habits are like, what their operations are like, whether it comes to their electricity hedging or purchasing, and for gas as well. So, understanding that any energy efficiencies you implement on one side will have a direct effect on the consumption side. So you need to make sure that those aren't netted off. That, you know, if a customer drops their consumption by 30%, are they violating any take or pay clauses in their supply contracts, right? So all of these need to be taken into consideration. Working with facilities managers, these guys know the ins and outs of a site thoroughly. So you definitely need to work with them. There was a a cat and dog food factory that I went to a couple of weeks back, and it was whilst the operational director was able to take us around and show us the site, it was the FM guys that knew exactly how the assets on site were operated. So it was their team that was then telling us, no, you can't do that, or our engineers were trying to design a new CHP for the site, and they were telling us, well, no, you need to have gas pressure needs to be X, and therefore we're going to see an increase in your gas consumption over time, but you'll see a drop in your electricity consumption. So you see, working with the FM guys on how those net each other off. And you're gonna have to keep on working with developers as well. People that are indeed looking at building some of these large renewable energy centers, whether it's ground mounted solar. We do need to keep working with them because they're the ones that are, taking the risk first. So they're the ones that are kind of going out there sourcing the land rights. And actually putting shovel to earth on some of these projects, which other investment groups might be a bit more, reluctant to go for. That doesn't hit the right IRRs. So this is a wide range of people that you do have to work with. And what we've seen in terms of technologies, I think CHP has been a big one. Here in the UK, we're seeing a very favorable spark spread where the cost of gas is quite low, and the cost of generation means it's quite favorable. We have seen quite a few pharmaceutical companies. One of our clients in Ireland have just installed a 4.2 megawatt CHP with adiabatic chillers to allow for them to meet their entire thermal and chilling demand whilst netting off from grid. Battery storage, that's another key technology that a lot of customers, large energy users are looking at, because it allows them to do various things like peak charge avoidance whilst also participating in various delivery service programs, so thereby monetizing their renewable energy assets, their flexibility, as it were. So there's a wide range of technologies and partners that you do have to work with. And we recognize that as a utility, which is why I think it's part of the rationale behind ESB's proposition here in the UK market, which is to say that we don't really want to do supply for large energy users. Let us focus on the energy savings initiatives, right? And you are still free to then make your purchasing choices.
Yeah, so it sounds like you guys are looking, sort of making sure you've got the capacity, and then you're trying to customize it to the partner that you're working with. I think it's quite an interesting approach to actually go and do that. I didn't realize how active you guys actually were outside of Ireland, but obviously a lot of great stuff you're doing on that. So what about you, Chris? Talk a little bit about some of the technologies, solutions and partnerships that Marston's have been employing to drive their program.
Yeah, well, for me, looking at smart energy, for me, that's using technology to leverage low carbon and renewable energy. And really, the key for me is making sure you flexibly manage your energy usage going forward. It's more about, rather than just reducing costs and reducing overall usage, it's actually about structuring your energy usage to best utilize renewable energy, whether that's through demand response, battery storage, or could even be heat storage. I mean, we operate obviously smaller pub restaurants and hotels. Obviously, we have got a few manufacturing sites, but actually the bulk of our energy usage is across those pubs and hotels. And actually for us, it's looking at how we can manage those using building management systems. And there are loads of technologies we're trialing at the moment, like battery storage, but actually there's a lot you can do already. So if you've got building management systems, you can use heat as a store. So rather than thinking, we've got no storage on site, actually you have, because you can store hot water, you can preheat the building, you can pre-chill cellars. So actually there's a lot you can do there to manage and make sure you obviously mitigate some of the high charge periods of the day, but also means you're utilizing more renewable energy, which is key to me. So we have partnerships with building management system providers for that sort of thing, which really does kind of push that area forward.
Yeah, I think you mentioned to me that you started to look at EV charging as well. You were looking at how to provide your customers with the infrastructure
Yeah,
vehicle. So
definitely, and I think it's important to look wider than the emissions directly within your scope. So, you know, for us, we're trying to look at how people are travelling to our sites, as that's a major production of emissions, is people driving to use pubs and hotels. So we want to help push forward sustainable transport. So we're at the moment we're installing rapid electric vehicle chargers across our estate. We're just coming up to the 100th site actually where we've installed them, which puts us one of the leading businesses in the country for installing rapid chargers. But we realise that's something that's not core to our business, so we don't want to directly manage those. So in that way, we've looked to partner with someone who can provide that solution that's in fitting with our business. Yeah, we do earn money off it, but we realise it's not core to the business and we don't want to directly manage those. So that partnership is really, really key in that area.
Yeah, so it sounds like you guys are really driving hard on the partnership piece, getting the right sort of companies to help you support your plans, whether that be building management, whether that be EV charging. You know, it sounds to me like that's a ethos of your strategy to try and find the right skills, the right to actually work to. Yeah, it's a good approach to do that. So
I think that's only growing going forward with COVID as well. Obviously, internal resources is difficult to get approved at the moment. So looking to partner people to get more resources is another way to do that.
Yeah, excellent. And Mark, what about from ISPN point of view? You know, what sort of specific solutions are you guys looking at?
Yeah, so I think what we've tried to do, we've focused mostly on the manufacturing sites because they're the highest user of energy and gas, and we've looked at almost trying to look at how the similarities across the different sites. So, for example, our HVAC systems, chillers, all different types of motors, boilers, etc. We're looking at optimization of especially the HVAC systems, because we could potentially reduce the overall consumption across the organisation between 15 and 20% by optimising the HVAC systems. It's not an easy task to achieve because there's lots of GMP requirements and regulatory requirements to go through. But it's something that we really need to focus our efforts on. And then obviously these replacements and optimization and really looking at equipment that's kind of redundant or reaching the end of life and looking for a greener option. But I think the other strategy that we've been looking at is to kind of build environments as well. So when we build a new building or we purchasing new assets to go in a building, we're looking for the green technologies. We're not just, as we have done in the past, buying the cheapest we can buy because they're cost effective. We're looking at something that will actually give us a level of sustainability moving forward, and also shows the payback from a business perspective. So when we're applying for CapEx, we're getting that CapEx because we're showing that payback. So there's a number of areas we're looking at, but we're doing it as a collective rather than individual sites working on their own, which is what we've always done. And I think it's a new strategy, and I think it will definitely work. And there's obviously economies of scale there as well, and we can work with partners in order to purchase a number of assets all from the one company, and obviously make potential savings there as well. So that's really what we're doing at the moment. But we're also looking at our car fleet, as mentioned as well, and looking at electric vehicles and charging points across sites. We've got huge amounts of commercial individuals out and about in different countries. So that's something that is really quite significant for us. That's something that we're looking at as a full fleet strategy.
Yeah, so it sounds like you guys are using the data to sort of look at the biggest impact areas, but you're also looking at areas that would influence all people who are operating your business. I think that's quite a good way of approaching it. So you can probably see that across our panellists, we've got a broad spectrum of different solutions are out there, but I think the key messages in there about looking at the biggest areas, focused on using partnerships, looking at the whole sort of life cycle of usage of a technology, you know, and then Labona talking to us quite specifically about customizing solutions then to to the customer that he's working with, you know, looking at the capacity that he needs to go and do that. So a real broad screen, I think, of solutions that are sat within there. So let's just have a look at, there's a couple of questions that have come in from the participants. Like, I know Labona's sort of doing some really good work already, getting a bit of an answer in there. So let's have a go at a couple of those and just throw those out to the panel. So somebody's asked, what were the most surprising energy saving initiatives which did not require high investment but reduced electricity consumption? So I think Labona's talked a lot about LED retrofits and lighting being that way. Any other guys, any other surprising energy initiatives that you've run into that didn't require high investment but gave a good reduction? So Chris, Tim, or Mark?
I'll jump in. I mean, for me, it's walking around your sites and buildings and just looking. And I'll give you an example. You know, in lockdown, I've got a 6-story multi-story car park. You know, looking at it in the morning and seeing that 6 floors of the car park are lit up, and I've got 12 cars on the bottom run. You know, it's picking up that low-hanging fruit. It's looking at the building. You know, I've probably got 60 staff in today in a building that holds 700. It's reducing the use of the building down to the first floor. I pulled everyone down to the first floor. I don't have to clean, I don't have to heat, I don't have to light those 5 other floors. But this isn't just a COVID thing. It's something you can do every day. Get in early, walk around the building once a month and see what's happening. You know, reducing, looking at when your building management system kicks in at the HVAC and the heating of the building. Is it kicking in at 4 o'clock in the morning? Could you put it on at 5:30 in the morning? Is it going to have the same impact for staff when they arrive in the morning? Look at the energy saving that you could make just by simple changes like that. Cost absolutely nothing, but actually added up can have a real impact on the energy consumption that you're reducing.
Yeah, so you're talking some real behaviours there, aren't you? And
yeah.
I suppose how COVID's then getting you to think a little bit differently. So what about Chris or Mark? Any other initiative you've seen that didn't require high investment?
Yeah, so for Ips and Biopharm, yeah, I mean, very similar, really. I mean, that's a really good point that's just been made. And I think what we've done is, because obviously I'm not in during the night, so what I tend to utilise is a security team. So very similar, they're going around identifying areas where there's low-hanging fruit, as mentioned, switching off lights, whatever it may be, but also making a list of those kind of areas where we could make changes, so we could utilise sensors, etc., so we can start to pull together an idea in terms of what we can go for very quickly. I think the other one that costs very, very small amount of investment is actually doing energy campaigns on site. Getting the buy-in from the staff, making sure that non-essential equipment's turned off at night, and getting them actively involved, because you can save between 10 and 15% of your site's electric, especially on our site where we've got a lot of labs where non-essential lab equipment is left on all night, not being used. If you label it up accordingly, you can get that switched off, and then even if people have forgotten to do it, the security team can go around and switch that equipment off. So little things like that can make a big difference, and as I say, it's very cheap to do.
Yeah, so some really interesting sort of behavioural sort of things that you can drive and stuff like that. Any builds for you, Chris?
Yeah, for me, equipment's a big one as well. So firstly, looking at the equipment you buy. So when equipment comes to the end of its life and you need to buy new equipment, making sure that you assess that equipment to make sure what you're buying has the lowest life cost. I do a lot of work with our procurement team on this, and actually what we find is energy generally with most of the large equipment purchases we make is the biggest cost over the lifetime of the equipment, not the initial capital outlay. So it really does pay to spend more money generally and get something that's more efficient. And we're finding we're making really, really big energy savings across the estate as newer equipment is rolled out and it is more efficient than the older equipment it replaces. We're making some really, really big energy savings. And then the other part of that with equipment is making sure you then look after that equipment while you have it, and making sure it's maintained and serviced properly so it's running at its most efficient levels. Whether it needs annual PPM, or you may be more targeted and meter that equipment and look when there's a drop in efficiency at that point, then service it. So looking at that whole life cycle of the equipment you're using can have a huge effect. And then obviously working out when the right time is to bite the bullet and get replacement equipment in that might be more efficient.
Yeah, it sounds really interesting way of looking at it. So somebody's done a bit of a follow-up as well, Tim, talking about how long will it be before turning off lights and bringing staff to the ground floor before it becomes automated. It sounds like you're already on the case with that one.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things I wrote down on, on some of the obstacles. I think it's a time of huge change across all organisations, and to the point where we're even looking at whether we need whole buildings. And I think that's one of the obstacles is maybe a reluctance from really senior leadership, particularly as we also approach Brexit, and the uncertainty there is, do they want to spend money currently, or do they want to wait 6 months and see where COVID comes out and where Brexit comes out? And I think that's an obstacle in the short term for everyone.
So just let's do one more question from the Q&A, and then I'll come back to the last question for the panel, really. So somebody asked the question, how fast are you able to collect data on Scope 2 reporting? Is it relatively easy to collect half-hourly data for electricity, or are you still experiencing problems collecting data? So again, I think Labona's on the case. He's already provided a response. Thank you very much for that. Any other builds from any of the panelists?
Only that Labona's spot on. I mean, we use a consultant, so I have a monthly report building to building, and I have, over time we've installed particular, recording points within our manufacturing process, so I can manage individual plant use as well. And his point earlier on was really strong. I think if you've got a good broker, you can also look at your usage and what your capacity is for particular buildings. And we made, I can tell you now, £100,000 saving last year by simply looking at what our capacity was in each of our sites, looking at our usage and reducing those down. And you can fluctuate up and down with them, but managing it to that level of detail can save thousands without absolutely zero spend. And it doesn't need to cost you any money, because most of those sorts of brokers will do a contract on the percentage of saving.
Yeah.
So it doesn't have to be a cost item either.
Oh, yes.
And further to Tim's point there about capacity charges, that is something we have also seen with some of our large, our large users here. They've been paying for the same capacity for the last 10, 15 years, and then having kind of put the two together to say, well, actually, my loads dropped by a third, and yet I'm still paying for this spare capacity. Now, some of them have plans to use that flexibility in the future, whether it means deploying EV, which is what we have seen. Some logistics and fleet providers are looking to where they've reduced their load through smart strategies and various energy saving initiatives. They're now saying, right, we have freed up 0.5 meg or 1 megawatt of capacity. What can we use that for? We don't want to reduce our capacity charges. So we've seen, like in North London, a logistics provider there, they're basically taking their car park and they're making it publicly available to customers, right? So what they'll be doing is then they'll be adopting a public/private hybrid model to on-street parking, on-street vehicle charging, right? So the idea is they will be utilizing their capacity to allow the public to charge, and that's typically going to be during the daytime when they have no use for it. You see, during the evening times they'll then encourage different behaviors by having chargers in place to disincentivize people from using that space. So therefore, they get their capacity back for their on-site operations, exactly as you touched upon.
Yeah. So it sounds like using your provider, getting your provider to provide some data, doing some analysis with that. My own experience as well is, look at where you can use some smart metering on site, where you can meter high users, and do your own metering. Don't probably put meters in for meters sense, but have a look at the big users, in particular the ones with fluctuating demand, and use your own meters to actually go and do that. Yeah. So let's just do a bit of a full sell. Let's just close off and ask a final question to the panel. I'm just conscious that with Chris and Mark, we missed them early on. So, you know, let's explore a little bit more, you know, about what you see going forward as both the personal and the business challenges that you see meeting your targets. So, you know, talk about your organisation, you know, what targets it's got and what difficulties you can see both at a personal and a business level in terms of delivering them. So, so Mark, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, the main obstacles for ourselves is that obviously with it being a pharmaceutical company, any of the manufacturing sites where they make changes, if it's not in the kind of grey areas, they tend to be areas where obviously it's a GMP environment. So this is good manufacturing practice. So this is where you need quality and regulatory submissions to the regulator to make any form of changes. So if we were to, say, for example, optimize an HVAC system, we've got to go through a huge array of process in order to implement that change. So what we're trying to do as a collective is pull all the manufacturing sites together, look at how we can go about it, and looking at how we can work on this process together. But if we were to implement a change, it can take between 6 months and 2 years to implement due to the regulatory requirements. So in many ways, that's our biggest obstacle in order to achieve what we want to achieve. In terms of CapEx submission, CapEx availability, so investment in capital, we've got a purse of money that we can apply for. And we've got a particular purse of CapEx, which is directly related to sustainability-based projects. But all the sites are competing for the same CapEx pot. So this is where it becomes almost like an internal competition for finances. So we've got to put a really good business case across to get that buy-in. What we found is, as a collective, if we all pull together as the main manufacturing sites and apply for the money, we're actually being very successful in getting it rather than trying to do it individually. So it's just different ways of going about it, but it's kind of odd to think that you're actually having to fight for your own CapEx within your own company, and it's internal resistance rather than external. So they're the main things really.
Yeah, so it sounds like collaboration is great, quite important to bring them across all the sites. Quite interesting to hear you talk about, you know, changes not being just quite straightforward either. You've got a lot of other considerations to look after, like quality, the GMP stuff that you talked about. Is that for your business, it's a little bit more complicated than just doing a straightforward replacement. So bearing in mind we miss you, Chris, quite a bit at the start. You know, talk to us a little bit about the sort of obstacles and challenges that you I know you guys have just gone into a partnership with Carlsberg, so you've got your own challenges just in terms of handling that, I understand.
Yeah, that's right. And it's come at a strange time for us with so much change in the hospitality sector at the moment with COVID, and we're now going through a joint venture with Carlsberg, which will see the brewing side of the business separate away from the pub and hotel side of the business. So that's going to bring quite a lot of challenges, obviously restructuring our corporate targets in line with those changes to the business for both sides, and then really resetting and coming up with new goals and new direction, because those two individual businesses are going to have, you know, a very much more focused approach going forward. So that's very much going to be kind of our direction over the next year, and trying to get that resolved and make sure we do bring in, you know, new carbon and energy targets in line with those changes of the business. As Mark just said, capital as well for us is a big challenge at the moment. You know, we're reduced budgets while the company is still backing some energy and carbon technology investment. It is reduced compared to where it was before. So trying to, you know, sweat the most out of that capital at the moment is really key to us and a big challenge, and it is competitive against other capital investments outside of energy and carbon projects as well, so that we're competing with. So that remains a challenge. Another big challenge for our business is staff turnover. So about, on our pub and hotel estate, about 60% of the people on the estate turn over a year. So it's a huge challenge making sure that those people are aware of energy management, they know how the systems work, they're aligned with what we want to achieve, and we've trained them to, to make sure they do work in a conservative manner with regards to energy. So that is one of the biggest challenges in the business, and that will carry on. I know with COVID as well, personnel changes have also increased as a result of that, and there's less resource there as well in terms of our people on site. So that's a really big challenge, and it's only getting more difficult going forward.
Yeah, good. So before I'm just going to ask probably Labona the same question. Just before I do that, any other Q&A that you've got, please go and submit that now. We've got probably about 5 or 10 minutes left at the end. We'll try and pick some of those questions up. So if you have got things you're thinking around now, flick them through on the Q&A, and Andrew in the background will help manage them for us. So Labona, just talk about a bit from your perspective as like more of a provider, what do you see sort of the major obstacles at both the personal and business level?
I think one of the key challenges is for quite a few businesses now is as they're reevaluating what their demand curves look like, right? And they're looking at forward hedging and forward planning. We want to be able to advise them because we can provide a very agnostic approach there, given that we have B2B supply side, right? And then so we're seeing a couple of factors in terms of push and pull where they have a mandate to reduce energy, but there is a limit on capital. So what we do in order to try and overcome that sort of solution is we do offer funding for these projects on a 15, 20-year basis. The idea is where customers know that they need to, reduce their consumption, but they don't know how to go about doing it. We can, for example, build them a CHP, right? This will help them net off from the grid. They might then indeed, they'll have almost a plentiful supply of hot water or indeed chilled water if they have if we put a chilled plant along with it. And then they don't have to worry about actually owning that asset because they'll just buy the output, the electricity and the heat that comes from it, right? That's one less problem. That's one less item for them to worry about on their balance sheet. So we're seeing, so we're coming out with clever solutions to help customers, who might have limitations with funding, but then also with regards to education internally, trying to, help all levels of the business understand what can be done, right? Whether it's, as you said, at a ground floor level, turning lights off, something a bit higher up the chain, i.e., changing behaviors on site, implementing a couple of energy savings initiatives, whether it's, like I said, lighting or even insulation, etc. And then all the way up to large, infrastructure projects, whereby which you are looking at cogeneration, rooftops, etc. So various obstacles, but various solutions in place for each and every single one.
So it sounds like you guys are trying to provide quite a lot of unique solutions, aren't you? Both at a lower level and then even for people like Chris and Mark who are struggling with funding, actually look at solutions that don't require funding. You guys go and help support that, and then they go into a supply contract. It's quite an interesting way of sort of doing that. So,
yeah, I mean, it's a way of, but I mean, a lot of people have, issues with operational leases or doing things off balance sheet. So it's a way for us to kind of fill that gap, right? But given that we are also the energy consultants in that capacity, they trust us to carry out the work. We're not going to build them a 10 megawatt engine when they need a 2 megawatt engine, for example, right? Yeah. Yeah, I hope that helps.
So just got a couple of questions that have come in from the audience. So I think I posed this one to Chris about how soon it would be before he saw the lights being turned off and staff being brought to the ground floor. I think it might be a bit more of a broader question that, what are you guys, how do you guys see the whole facilities piece being different as you come back out of COVID? What will it mean for you in terms of managing your estates on site? So does anybody want to chip in with that one? Tim, do you want to expand a bit on that one?
Yeah, I mean, I tell you what, that's the number one topic of conversation in our legal entity meetings. I mean, it's a huge, there's some massive changes. I think what we've shown is that many people that you wouldn't have expected have worked brilliantly and efficiently at home and not in the office. I think what we're going to see is a huge change moving forward in our flexible working patterns for our teams. Talking to our company presidents and our senior membership, senior board members, is that what they don't want to lose is that interaction. So I think it's a fine combination. You know, I've seen Pfizer in the news quite excitedly today, but their office, you know, I visited their office in Burgess Hill 18 months ago. You know, they're managing their space so that you know, it's an open desk policy, but they've gone to the extent where an individual will book their desk for the following day on an online app.
Yeah.
So if there's only 30% of the staff going to be in the office that day, they automatically only offers the areas available in. So that, you know, that's the kind of systems that will be the new norm. You know, that's one company that's done it already, but actually that's the way offices are going to be working in the future. You know, the days of going back, walking in and going to your desk where it's full of, you know, your family photographs is just gone. You know, it's an open plan office where you book your space for the working day, and that's going to be the new norm.
I think the way that we're doing this round table probably emphasises that as well, doesn't it? We were probably doing this in some sort of conference centre somewhere, but you know, doing it this way shows our lives changing. So I've got another couple of quick ones in here. So you know, somebody chip in who's got the experience. If you had £100,000 euro annual budget for building energy management or building efficiency improvement in a warehouse property, how would you allocate it? So anybody who's got experience of warehouses, where would you go and spend €100,000? And I don't think it's a big party that we're looking for. So. Anybody any experience in that area?
I've got lots of warehouses. Two things that Labona picked up on it: lighting. You know, your buyback on lighting, it can be less than 2 years.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing, and then you know, insulation.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, I think my experience is the same. LED lighting fittings. You know, if you haven't done that already, you can do that relatively easy. Lots of providers out there as well. It can be quite cost efficient to go and do that. So, any other stuff?
I think the other thing to consider is whether it's temperature controlled, the warehouse. So obviously you can do a lot of work on that in terms of the set points to reduce the range down, which would then mean that you potentially don't have to run the equipment at such high capacity, so therefore saving energy. But it obviously depends on whether that's the type of warehouse that the individual who's put the question in has. But obviously it's quite easy fix to achieve, especially in a non-regulatory environment.
Yeah, so it sounds like buildings, looking at building management, looking at lighting. So, and I'll go for one more. I'm aware we're right towards the end here, but I want to make sure we sort of cover everything. So somebody asked a question, can you say more on what reporting methods you're using? So I think this is it all about CDP, and does it bother you that a grid carbon is a grid carbon figure and not a local figure? So I think this is probably more about, you know, are you using, is it all about CDP reporting or other systems that you're using for reporting? So
by CDP, I understand. I think I take the question as to mean, you know, customer data platforms, right? So in that case, we do use open APIs that do allow for, so which allows us to, you know, basically patch in to different customer portals as well, energy portals. Like I said, you know, maintaining this agnostic approach is kind of in our favor. And so the question about grid carbon, is that not local? Yeah, it would be lovely to be able to know what the grid carbon intensity was at any given, you know, location across the country. But I mean, I don't think the environmental agency or even National Grid have the means to kind of do that level of reporting. Oh wait, carbon disclosure project.
yeah, it could be carbon disclosure projects as well. I think that's.
There we go. Sorry, that was the other one.
You might be right, Labona. It sounded very good what you were talking about. Yeah, I think a lot of organisations using CDP to report at a global level their carbon emissions.
Yes, and that's what we're indeed interfacing with.
It could also be where the question's coming from. But yeah, thanks for that anyway. So I just thought I'd do a bit of a wrap up. Just thought I'd say thanks very much for all the panellists for giving up your time. You know, it was interesting to really hear how your businesses are changing and evolving as we move through this pandemic. But a lot of you talking about a very positive outlook for the future, and you know, great work that you're all doing to either provide solutions in Labona's case, or you three guys actually running your organisations and driving a smart energy strategy. So thanks very much for making the panel very easy.